Hi guys, this video is going to be about ENB, and basically a lot of people ask me, why don't you use ENB, or if they think I'm using it, which ENB do I use, etc. So I'm gonna explain this. Now, I used ENB in Fallout New Vegas, I used Tapioca's enhanced shaders, and I also used the same mod in Skyrim, again by Tapioca's, and it was a very subtle ENB. It wasn't very stylized. It improved the shading in small, subtle ways that I really liked. Ambient occlusion, little things. But I've not used them in Fallout 3, and I'm going to sort of explain to you why. And as a baseline, this is me with Project Reality running, and I'm getting approximately between 80 and 85 frames a second with whilst recording. Obviously I get more than that when not recording, but that's with recording. And as you can see, I have no depth of field. That means everything's focused, all the textures are pretty sharp, etc. I've got anti-aliasing set to 4, and I have that's pretty much it. So as you can see, it's a pretty bland image. A lot of people don't really like that. Now here is the don't walk sign, basically with the next generation ENB running, and you can see a massive difference. Now I've turned anti-aliasing off. This mod does a little bit of anti-aliasing itself. It's not as good as the game's anti-aliasing in my opinion. Around the top of the panel here you can sort of see some aliasing, which is slightly annoying. But as you can see, you've got a very strong depth of field, and it's actually a very nice depth of field. I like the way ENB does its depth of field. It can be very strong without distorting, whereas if you use the game's depth of field, you can't go beyond a certain limit before the game starts to have very odd effects. Okay, so but also you can see the colours are extremely vibrant. However, one thing you should know before using something like this is the frame rate right now is about 37. So that's from 80 to 85 to 37. My frame rate has halved right there at that shot. So frame rate not as good, but shading is nice. Shading is nice. As you can see, the colours might be a little bit too saturated for me. So if I go to my sniper rifle and have a look at these guys, you can see the skin, the reds are very vibrant, but that's okay. It's sort of a matter of personal taste if you like your colours that vibrant. But yeah, I actually think the colours look nice. They do. And the depth of field is very strong, and the shading is quite nice. However, that's one enormous frame rate drop. Now when I'm not recording, it goes back up. It probably jumps to about 55, which is playable, but I record my games, so not quite for me. Oh, one other thing. It's difficult to see. You probably can't see it on the video, but there is a slight film grain, and basically what film grain is like a speckle effect that makes it look like you're looking at something with grain, a texture. In this case it's a static grain, so it actually looks like a photograph. It looks like the picture has been printed onto paper because it's got a static grain. And if I look away from things that are animated, like the sky, if I just look here and and stop moving, I honestly can almost not tell if the game is running or if it has stopped, because it feels like a photograph now because of that grain. It's a very nice effect, film grain. I use it quite a lot with one of my own mods, and it does give it a very cinematic, well actually a very picturesque look. So when you're taking screenshots, it gives them a feeling of texture. So it is very nice. Now this is the Midrastic ENB, which is a little bit different setting. Again, the depth of field is very nice. It's very strong. I do believe there's a weaker version for this one, which is quite nice. Colours are pretty good. They're not as in your face as the next generation ones. Not as saturated. I actually think I prefer the colours in this one. But one of the things I'm not too keen on is the anti-aliasing. If you look at the bus here, can you see? I'm not sure if you can see that, but the anti-aliasing is not. I really don't like it that much. I've got to be honest. I prefer the in-game anti-aliasing. It's not too bad up close, but you can still see it. You can still see it depending on the angle you look at. So that's one thing I don't like. But I think I prefer the colour scheme to this one. But again, frame rate. Stood here looking at this. Frame rate is approximately 35, 36. So as you can see, you're still paying for this. Very nice, but you do pay a price for it. The other thing I noticed with this ENB is that the textures have been slightly blurred. There's a slight fogging on everything, especially distance, but even close objects or medium range objects. There's a lot of fogging on them, which makes it look very cinematic actually, very sort of, not quite dream state, but it's definitely a slightly misty look to everything. And that does help if you're using low quality textures. I'm actually using NMC's textures, so that's not much of a help to me. But as you can see, it's a little harder to spot edges, even though the anti-aliasing is fairly, you know, as I said, I'm not impressed with it. You still don't see the computerized edges because there is a slight blur. If you look at this Garrett, he is not as distinct as he would be in the vanilla game. Even when I zoom in on him. See, he gets a little sharper there. But without the zoom, he's pretty indistinct. Whereas with the vanilla game, he's actually quite visible. If I turn the ENB off, there you go. That's ENB off, and this is vanilla. I don't have Project Reality installed here, but as you can see, all of the textures are now crystal clear, including Garrett. You can see the edges very sharply. So put that back on again. So it's very atmospheric. It's very cool looking. Definitely, especially when you look at shots like that. Very, very photogenic. If you look at the ramp, everything's sort of a tiny bit blurred, and that just, it lends to the idea of this being photographed on a sort of an older camera. I don't think there's a film grain on this one. I can't detect one. If there is a film grain, it's very, very faint. Still, it's actually very nice. I do like it, but I don't think I would play like this. It is too much like playing an old photograph. So okay, so it seems to be a choice between this, the sort of vanilla, stark, slightly boring, and the ENB, which looks better but has basically a massive frame here. I mean, half the frame rate that I get here. But that's not quite true. There is an alternative. There are some mods, and I'll give you fair warning, I helped make 3 of these mods. In fact, one of them I made completely, 2 of them I co-authored. So I am biased. You should know this. I am biased, so take my opinion with a pinch of salt and make your own opinion. But there are mods that will give you similar effects. So I've covered them before, but I will show you them now. If I press F7, it brings up Director's Chair, and you can't see it very well because of where I'm looking, but I don't want to move because I want to keep the picture compatible. And I'm going to start by putting the depth of field Dynavision on to active, and I'm going to put it on, say, high with medium speed focus. And I think you can see already there is now a depth of field in the background. Let me turn that off again. There it is off. There it is on. So as you can see already a bit of an improvement. So, but there are a few other things I can do. For example, the Dynavision soft focus. Now what this does is it softens edges and textures. One of the things you'll notice in ENB is a lot of the textures seem slightly blurred. It makes low quality textures look fairly good, so you can actually use low quality textures with ENB and often don't notice it over the high definition ones. You can get something similar with Dynavision's soft focus, like so, and again it softens the image slightly. You can have it, it's up to you, and it's probably not something you're going to notice on the video. I can see it on my screen. It is faint, but it does increase the blur of everything. But there are other things. So for example, if I go to Cinematech style and go to Trek Vaseline Cam, now as you can see, all of a sudden all my colours are a lot more vibrant. There is also slight blurring again, because this is supposed to imitate smearing Vaseline onto the lens of a camera. Hey, don't ask me. Apparently some cameramen do this to get this effect. But there you go. So you've got this slight effect there. There are other options. Cinemator, for example, I could pick something like Ultra Cool Blue. If you really want a sort of a very blue, this has got a lot of colour. And you can even mix them. So Trek Vaseline Cam with Ultra Cool Blue. As you can see now, the colours are very, very vibrant. Maybe even slightly more vibrant than the ENB. And with the Imaginator, you can actually tweak it even more. If you go into the Pip-Boy, there are some options that let you tweak it a little bit at a time. There's also some hotkeys. I will show you those. But before I do that, there's also the Imaginator's emitter. So I can change the light so the shading looks a little different. That one makes the shadows a lot deeper. Bloomer. If you look at the bloomer now, look at the Don't Walk. Look at the Don't Walk. See how it seems to glow as if it's got a light inside it? Well, it has, but it's now really glowing. So you can sort of play with these things, these settings, to your heart's content. And you remember the film grain? The one that made it look like a photograph? Well, this has a dynamic film grain in Cinematech. This is just a touch of static. Now, you might not be able to see this on the video. It's a little bit more visible than the one in ENB, but it moves. So the static effect actually moves so that it looks more like a TV or a film projected onto a wall. You've got a lot of control over this, so you can make it very, very faint and almost impossible to see. So you can just detect it at the edge. That's up to you. There are some very, very unsubtle changes. Hollywood Heroes, for example, if you want to look like an old movie, as you can see with the crackles, I don't think most people would want to play with that. But the touch of static is a fairly nice one. So as you can see now, radically different image. I'm going to close that. Radically different image to the one the vanilla game has. A lot more compatible. Now this is perhaps a little too dark actually. And that's because of the... Perhaps that one is a better one. Yeah, how about that one? So as you can see now, colours are a lot more vibrant. You've got depth of field with the blur. It's, again, I don't think it's quite as good as ENB's, but it is definitely noticeable. And the other thing is the anti-aliasing is a lot better because I've got anti-aliasing set on plus the edge blur. Now if I go back to my sniper rifle to look at these people, as you can see, the reds are possibly a little too overkill, and I think that's because I'm mixing too many of these. So if I put that back, as you can see, this one now is a little bit more subtle. The red's not as vibrant. And so I have far more control, and I can control it in game. I can change the settings at will. And again, people will tell you the ENB is better, and they're probably right. Some of the ENBs are. But when I go back here and look at this, my frame rate is 62. So instead of 80 with vanilla, I get 62. Whereas with ENB, I got 37. So as you can see, a massive difference in performance. So not only does it perform better, and I have a lot of control, I can change it in game at will as often as I like. I can suddenly decide, you know what? I'm in the mood for John Wayne's Slow Shutter. I always get that wrong. And Hollywood Heroes. Close that. And as you can see, very sort of, I don't know, pre-war, post-apocalyptic movie. And you can change it as often as you like. So this is why I generally don't use ENB. I don't feel much of a need to, because I can get very similar effects with, you know, I mean, and go completely insane if you want. Washy Western, crappy old TV. Oh dear. This one doesn't work very well with Project Reality. Obviously, it depends on your light mod as well. The Trek Vaseline cam seems to work quite well, actually. That's the one I think is closest to the ENBs, adding the slight blur and the colour enhancements. But again, matter of personal taste. So don't get me wrong, I am not trying to say that ENB is bad. I think it's a great mod. And if you've got the rig to push it, if you've got the rig to use it, there's no reason not to. You pick one that matches your personal taste, and if none of them match your personal taste, you can actually change the settings on the ENBs to match your own needs, to match your own settings, just as well as you can with the mods I've just shown you. Obviously, you can't change them once in game. All you can do is turn them on and off, so that's a disadvantage. So I'm not getting at ENB at all. It's an exceptionally good mod. And it will make your game look absolutely superb. And some of them make the game look very cinematic indeed. I mean, really cinematic. And you have to decide if that's why you want to play it. Because me, I don't really want to play it even like this. Even though it looks quite good, I think I would rather have the film grain off, the depth of field a little less. And I'm not even totally sure about... Actually, you know what? I quite like that setting, the Trek Vaseline cam. But I don't like the depth of field to be quite as strong, so I've set mine to be quite low now. So as you can see, there's a subtle blur. But it's I find it a little easier to play when the depth of field is not quite as strong. So as you can see here, the background is blurred a little, but not completely. And I like that. Now, as I mentioned, you can actually fine-tune this, and you can fine-tune this from the keyboard, actually, without going in the Pip-Boy. If you press the 0 key on your numpad, and, for example, press the 7 key, you can see contrast going up as I'm pressing it. If I press 4, contrast goes down, and I can go into the negatives. If I press the 8 key, that is brightness going up, and down. I have to keep my finger on the 0 key on the number pad, and then 9 and 6 controls saturation. So you can see you can get a lot of control over. Contrast is probably one of the biggest ways to improve the look of shadows and shading. As you can see, as I've increased the contrast now, the underneath of objects looks a little better. If you look at the contrast here, look underneath the Don't Walk machine here, the yellow thing. Now if I increase the contrast, if you look underneath it where it looked pretty bright before, suddenly it looks a lot more shaded. It actually looks like there's shadows, so that's kind of cool. And maybe I want to drop the brightness. I noticed the ENBs tended to be a little bright, so I can drop the brightness, increase the contrast, maybe push the saturation up. That makes colours pop out a lot. So as you can see there, there's the greens and the colours are already popping, and they mix with the other settings. So if I go along to the Trek Vaseline cam, as you can see, I can play around with. I think the saturation there's a little too aggressive. Maybe there. Make it a little darker, make the contrast a little better, add the film grain, and so on. But as you can see, basically, you've got complete, full control, which allows you to fine-tune this to exactly your needs. You could desaturate it so it's almost black and white. You could saturate it so much that it's almost like a cartoon. The ENB is a very good mod and it will make your game look a lot better, but I don't use it because honestly I can get what I need from the game from other mods that give me far higher performance, and that is basically it in the end. So you have to make your own decision really. Do you want the game to look a certain way? If you find an ENB that captures the kind of mood you want, use it. For me, I like the game to be tweaked a little bit more subtly. As I said, I have found some ENB mods that give me what I need, but I can get more or less the same, maybe not quite the same quality, but I can get more or less the same with some other mods, and I get a lot less of a performance hit. And for me, in the end, that's slightly more important. I'm a massive frame rate junkie. I like to keep frame rate way over 60 if possible, but 60 is a minimum, even when recording. It's just me. I know some people are not sensitive to it, and they're far more sensitive to colours and shadows. But for me, fluid movement, that's the thing. So I'll be sticking with the way it is right now. Anyway guys, I hope that answered any questions you had regarding ENB and why I don't use it.
I don't want to set the world on fire.